Experience work interactions in a different and refreshing light. This is the Leader in You podcast, brought to you by EMC Leaders, taking care of the teams you care about, as well as the connected culture.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Leader in You podcast. We are so excited to be here today. My name is Paulina, and I'm co-hosting this amazing podcast with Dr. Lola Gershfeld, who also happens to be my mom. Yay!
Hi, Paulina. So nice to be here with you. And thank you so much to everyone for listening to our podcast.
We have a very exciting guest today, and we're very excited to bring him on this podcast because he is all about leadership. Actually, he teaches leadership at my former university that I attended. So we're very excited to welcome you, Ryan. Welcome to the Leader in You podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me on, and thanks for creating such a great podcast. I love listening to your episodes, and of course, I know Lola and have known her for a few years now, and have appreciated all our conversations. And glad we kind of are able to have a somewhat formal conversation here.
Yeah, definitely. We're excited.
Welcome, Ryan. I just want to say hi to you and thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
So, Ryan, tell us, for the people who are listening who have no idea who you are and want to get to know you, tell us about you. We know that you are an amazing author. You have a book called Becoming Better, which I already love the title because anytime we talk about emotional process or understanding emotions or emotional safety or leadership or how we could show up in this world, we want to take every day as an opportunity to become better, right? To become better humans, to show up in a better place, and to be the best version of ourselves that we possibly can be. So tell us about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with you. We're never done becoming better. And I don't know about you, but that's kind of my personal aspiration is I always want to become better because I know that if I could become better, I could become a brighter light in the world around me. And I want to help others do that as well. And so the ways in which I do that is, as mentioned, I'm a leadership professor at Cal State Fullerton. I teach and do research on leadership. And then I'm also a leadership development consultant. I help organizations all over the world to develop and elevate their leaders so that they could be this brighter light in their organizations.
That's awesome. And tell us about your book. Like, how did that come about, and what's the preface to it?
Yeah. So this is my third book. First book was called Success Mindsets. Second book is called The Elevated Leader. And I feel like this book, Becoming Better, the groundbreaking science of personal transformation, is a culmination of really all of my learnings over the last decade in studying how do people become transformationally better. See, here's what I've learned is most people know how to become incrementally better. We know how to do this because it's taught in our education systems, our athletic programs, and most of our organizational development efforts. And the way that most people try to become better is they try to gain new knowledge, new skills, new degrees, new certificates, right? We've all
Sounds
done
like
that.
my husband. Yeah, sounds like my husband. He loves getting more certificates.
Yeah, right?
Certificate
And because what that does is it's kind of like adding an app onto our iPad. Like that's great. It's great to have a lot of apps because then we could do a lot of things. But what I've learned is that approaching development in that way really is only incrementally helpful. If we want transformational growth and development, we've actually got to take a different strategy. It's not about upgrading the apps on our iPad. It's about upgrading the operating system of that iPad, upgrading our internal operating system. So this book, Becoming Better, is all about how we do that. We've got the way that I call it is we've got two sides of ourselves. We've got a doing side, that's our talent, knowledge, skills, and abilities, and we've got a being side. That's the quality and sophistication of our operating system. And if we want to become transformationally better, we've got to awaken to our being side, evaluate our altitude along our being side, and then elevate along our being side. And that's all three of those steps are just things that most people aren't familiar with. So I hope that this book is a book that will help people awaken to this new developmental path and then ultimately lead to them transformationally becoming better.
I love that, and you sound so excited. Actually, I was looking at that success mindset book that you have behind you when I first came on, and I was like, that book looked so familiar. And if I turn to look at my little bookcase, I think I actually have
All
are you
right.
have your success mindsets book. I didn't even realize that was your book when we were first talking at the beginning of this podcast. So that's very, very exciting to
And
hear.
I actually read Ryan's latest book, Becoming Better, and I found it very intriguing. I listened to the audiobook and I wanted to hear more. I love the stories. I like the personal stories and being so courageous and sharing. I also liked the topic on attachment and the importance of learning how to recognize and understand yourself better. I liked the inspiration for going to therapy and learning more about your relationships. I think it covered it all. So, congratulations to you, Ryan.
Oh, thank you
I
so much.
also I also happen to look down. I have Audible on my phone because I'm a huge audiobook fan. And sure enough, I have your book here, Success Mindsets by Ryan, right there at the top.
You got it. All right. Good.
So that's awesome. Yeah. And now I didn't know that you have this new book, so we're excited to talk about it.
Yeah.
So tell us what was like your inspiration? What was there like a turning point, or was there a moment in your life where you were like, oh my gosh, I've realized that this process is the way, the direction, the path to incredible leadership. And so I have to be taking inspired action to make this into reality. So was there a moment like that you experienced in your life?
Well, there surely was a moment that started the process, but it's been a process of really kind of learning and growth over the last 8 years to kind of solidify these ideas in a way that I could articulate them, I think, in a clear and I hope a really powerful way. But let me take you back to the kind of, in a way, the moment that started all of this. So I was a professor at Cal State Fullerton for 2 years, and I had this itch to do some consulting work. And so I decided to take a leave of absence from Cal State Fullerton, and I spent 10 months working at Gallup doing employee engagement consulting work. And 10 months into this, and honestly, I was a bit frustrated with my role. I kind of felt like I had been kind of pushed into the corner into a role that was smaller than what I felt like I had been promised when I took the position. And so I was feeling a little bit cornered and a little bit frustrated. And I had been expressing my frustration for a period of time. And on one particular day, I'm talking to my manager and I'm kind of venting a little bit of my frustration. And she said, Ryan, stop. And I said, okay. And she said, this clearly isn't working out. I'm going to have to let you go. And I got fired. And I never thought I would ever get fired. And so this was a massive wake up call. I mean, it was, as you can imagine, I don't know if you've experienced, but there's immediate shame that comes with this. Like, I failed my family. Who gets fired? Only, crummy people get fired is kind of the mentality that I had. And I had gotten fired. And so I was in a position where I had to regroup from this. And I decided to go back to Cal State Fullerton. But in that process of returning back to Cal State Fullerton, I started to dig in terms of my research into mindsets and the role that mindsets play in leadership effectiveness. And as I started to study mindsets, what I started to realize was while I thought I had really positive or high quality mindsets, I started to discover that I didn't.
Mm.
And so what I began to realize is that while I had the knowledge and skills to be successful at Gallup, I lacked the mindsets to be successful. And
Mm.
so over the next several years, I developed kind of a consulting curriculum and coaching curriculum focused around mindsets. And I used to go around to organizations and say, hey, I can help you upgrade the mindsets of your leaders. And I would do that. And what I just realized is this type of development is different than most development. And I didn't really have language to describe how it was different until I came across the terminology that's now becoming more popular around the difference between horizontal and vertical development. Have you, either of you, heard of this terminology before?
Only from your
No,
book. I heard it from your book.
yeah, not until I heard it from you.
So it's not well known, right? So horizontal development is development that we engage in that improves along our doing side. We gain new knowledge and new skills. And that's again what most people focus on. But there's also the different approach, which is called vertical development. And that's elevating along our being side. So it wasn't until I had this terminology that I was then able to describe to people what I do uniquely is I help leaders vertically develop. And this is unique and it is different than what we're used to. But the value of engaging of it is that it can be transformational. So, anyways, it all started with that experience of getting fired, and then it's snowballed now into 3 books and us having this conversation.
That's wonderful. I have some more questions, Mom, but do you have anything that you'd like to say before
Well, I can imagine the traumatizing experience that, being fired. It's very traumatic to get fired. As you explained, lots of shame, and it's very difficult even to imagine that yourself in that position. So I can appreciate your drive to really become better, to understand how is it possible and what can I do to improve. So that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that.
for sure. Well, and I also just don't think I'm unique. I almost think that everybody can identify a time where they felt they had the knowledge and skills to be successful, yet they weren't. And I think most people in that position have a hard time kind of determining why was it that I didn't reach the success that I felt I was capable of. And the reason why they have a hard time with this and why I had a hard time is because again, I was really connected to my doing side. I was not very connected or self-aware of my being side. In fact, you may be familiar with Tasha Urich's research. So she's a self-awareness researcher. She's got a great TED Talk. And one of the things that she communicates is that 95% of people think that they are self-aware,
Mhm.
but only 10 to 15% are actually self-aware. And one of the ways that I make sense of that is I think that 95% of people think that they're self-aware because they're familiar with their doing side, but
Mhm.
only 10 to 15% are actually familiar with their being side. And that's where I think, where those ultimately those statistics come from. And so, again, if we could get connected to our being side, then that's where true self-awareness lies. And that's what I feel like has been my experience is awakening to my being side, then help me explain one, why I got fired, and then two, what I've got to do to not have that happen again.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, we appreciate you
To
kind
actually
of become.
kind of live up to the level.
I think we might be losing him. Did we lose him?
It's okay. Yeah, he's back.
Oh, okay. There you are.
Sorry about that.
I feel like just if we kind of go along with what you're saying about in that being side, like shifting. I did a leadership training for 5 months and they talked a lot about how people are so focused on the do, be, have cycle as opposed to the be and then do have cycle.
Mhm.
So we are doing the things to try to be the person, to try to have the things instead of being the person, being in the experience, and then doing the things and then having the things. So that's really interesting to see that. So along those same lines, you know what we do here at EMC Leaders. So EMC, the reason why we teach this podcast is because we talk a lot about leadership on an emotionally connected level, how we can incorporate using this specific process that Dr. Lola created that really dives deep into our emotions, understanding how to respond to each other's feelings, fears, and needs in order to stay emotionally connected. So with that being said, the reason why we want you to come on here and talk to us, and why we feel very much aligned in a lot of the things that we teach and the things that you share, is that you look at this leadership perspective as the importance of healing through in order to be transformative in the way that you lead. So tell us about, like, what does that look like for you? What does healing to become a transformative leader look like?
Yeah, well, and healing, we just kind of rip the band-aid off, and healing is a really deep topic. So I want to get into healing, but let me just at a surface level reference, and I agree with you, there's complete synergy, and I think in what we've been talking about in my framework and what you focus on, because here, all of that emotional, I'm going to just broadly say it, intelligence component, that's a being side ability. That's not a doing side. But when we try to help people improve in their emotional intelligence, we generally focus on that horizontal development. What are the things that you need to know? What are the things that you need to do? And the reality is I think, for example, listening is important for the emotional component of leadership. And I think most people know how to listen and they have the skills to listen. But the reality is not many people have the internal operating system to listen effectively in the heat of the moment, right?
Wait,
When that
I have to
conflict
pause
is
you.
happening.
I have to pause you really quick, and I apologize for interrupting, but this kind of goes back to what you were saying, how people think that they're self-aware. Like, if 75% of people thinking that they're self-aware, but there's really only like 15% of people that are actually aware. I feel this exact same way when it comes to emotional intelligence, because I hear so many people say, like, throw that word around, like, oh, I'm so emotionally intelligent. Like, oh, I want to find, an employee that's so emotionally intelligent. Oh, I want to create an emotionally intelligent workplace. Or this even goes back to our personal relationships, right? Like, oh, I want to find a partner that's emotionally intelligent. But the bandwidth in which they have stretched their emotional muscle has not actually matched the intelligence that they may have of the emotional intelligent context of the topic, right? So what if we reference it to what you're saying, like, they have emotional intelligence maybe horizontal because they've read, maybe Dr. Lola's book, The Connected Culture, or they've read Evolve, or they've understood, the psychologist, for example, Andrew Huberman, or whoever talks about, but they haven't understood vertically in relation to what you say, how to integrate it. So that when there is a moment in their situation, in their workplace as a leader, they really can't take those skills. And you said listen in the heat of the moment. How could we be responsive in those difficult times? So yeah, okay, keep going. I'd like to actually like to see to test people who say they're emotionally intelligent, and to see the percentage of people that are actually, what does that actually mean? Can you take the emotional intelligence and integrate it into your life and then take action when you're really, really in a difficult situation?
Yeah, I mean, let me throw myself under the bus because I feel like I was one of those people. I mean, if you would have come up to me 5 years ago and you would have said, "Are you emotionally intelligent?" I would have said, "Oh yeah, and I would tell you all the things that I know about emotional intelligence. But let me tell you about some of the kind of self-awakening that has occurred within me over the last 5 years. So I came across a book, and I'm guessing you're familiar with it, but it's Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score. So this is a book about
Mhm.
trauma and the impact that trauma has on our body and physiology.
Yeah.
And I am reading this book, and I'm thinking as I'm reading it, I don't have any trauma in my background. All right, that's kind of the place I was at. But as I'm reading this book, he's starting to describe some things that are like, huh, like this is consequences of trauma, and he's talking about things that, wait, like, does he know me? Like this sounds like me. And I'm kind of just got this big question mark over my head, like, but I don't have trauma. How is he describing me and I don't
Yeah.
have trauma? And what he's describing, at least for me, what resonated with me was a term that I had never heard of before. And it's a term called dissociation. So
Mhm.
dissociation is a diminished capacity to connect with our body, our senses, and our emotions. And I would say that I'm a pretty stoic person. I am level-headed, like I don't get stressed out, but I don't get super excited. Like my emotional bandwidth is quite limited, and I always saw that as a strength. But as I'm reading this, the way that he calls it sounds bad. This is You're dissociated. And I'm thinking, wow. Like, and so as you can tell, I'm kind of deepening my self-awareness. And at the end of the book, he gives an overview of different trauma treatment modalities, and he brings up a modality I'd never heard of before, and it's called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR. And this sounds hocus pocus to me. I mean, he's saying like people can get like their eyes go back and forth, and then all of a sudden it allows them to process trauma in a more effective way. And I'm thinking, what is this stuff? And so I'm pretty curious. I call up, I look, just Google EMDR therapist in my area, and just right downtown in Fullerton, there's a EMDR therapist. I call her up and I say, hey, I don't have any trauma in my life, but this EMDR sounds pretty interesting. Can I try it out? And I'm sure she's chuckling. Like, who calls a therapist and says they don't have trauma in their life, right?
The
But that's
people
where
who
I
have
was.
trauma, right?
And so I start engaging with this therapist to try this out. And so she's okay. She's like, okay, we're going to try to find a block that you have, and we could work through that block, and we'll use EMDR to do that. And I was like, okay, that sounds great. So we start to get into this, and she starts to see not just one block, but multiple blocks. And part of the process of EMDR is to kind of dig deeper and find, where do those blocks come from? And we start to explore that, and my kind of the veil like is getting pulled from my eyes. And what I discovered with her help that I never realized or appreciated is, and this is why I didn't feel like I had trauma. My parents were always physically there for me. Like they went to every sporting event that I ever participated in. And I had a lot of sporting events. But what I learned is that while my parents were there for me physically, they were rarely there for me emotionally. So I discovered that the trauma in my background was emotional neglect. And the consequence of that was a certain level of dissociation. And so all that to say, and to come back to kind of what you were saying about emotional intelligence, is I thought I was emotionally intelligent, but there was no way that one can be dissociated and emotionally intelligent. It is impossible, right? And so that's what I came to learn is, I may know about emotional intelligence, but my capacity to be emotionally intelligent is diminished by the trauma in my past. And what I've come to learn, and it's been part of the work that I've been doing the last several years, is if I truly want to become emotionally intelligent, I've got to heal my body so that I don't have, so that I'm not dissociated, and so that I could better connect with my emotions and feelings. Because if I can't connect with my emotions and feelings, it's impossible for me to connect with and navigate the emotions and feelings of others. And so doing this work, like as I just described my process, this work that I've done on myself, and I'm not done doing it, but that's being side development work. It's not doing side development work. It's being side development work. And I would say it has been not incrementally helpful, but transformationally helpful. So I threw that bomb on you. I don't know. Let's unpack that.
No,
What are the other questions you have?
you know what? We were actually just talking about this today. We were teaching a webinar this morning, talking about whether we feel emotionally safe in our environment, and how to determine whether you feel emotionally safe or not. And this is the thing, if you're used to one specific environment and you're raised that way, and those are the tools that you have, and now you have these automatic thoughts and protective behaviors that go on in that environment, and you don't know anything else, you don't think you have trauma. You don't think that there's anything wrong. You may be suffering in different ways. You may be curious as to, like, why am I so unhappy in my life, or why am I so unhappy in my job, or you could have all these questions that come up, but doesn't connect that this could be directly related to the unknown trauma that you experience. And I was actually even saying that, I didn't learn about emotions, conflicts, what is a conflict, how to communicate, not until I was 35. I was already divorced after being married for 15 years. And I didn't even understand any of that until I learned, like, oh, there's feelings. Oh, there's shame associated with those feelings. Oh, we are intrinsically motivated to take action based off of our emotions. So when you don't know those things, that, of course, you don't think that environment is toxic or has trauma or your responses or you're dissociated. We don't know any of those things. So of course it makes sense, like everything that you shared. And I know, Mom, I want to give you the opportunity to speak on this too, but I can just tell you in so many instances where I said, like, what is going on with this person? Like, I can't put my finger on it. Like, they almost seem, it's not like they're not connecting or connected, but it's almost like they have that dissociation with their own experiences. And just like you were saying, everything's fine. Like, they're not too excited about life, but they're not, like, they don't go to the other extreme. They just kind of stay in this, like, oh, I'm just like going along life, like, not really, and I even asked this one person, I was sharing with my mom this conversation I had, and I asked this guy, so what do you have anything that you're really excited about? Because I'm like a very excited, enthusiastic person, like I come with big emotions and big energy. I have like really high highs and really low lows. And so I was like, what are you passionate about? What are you excited about? Like, what in your work drives you? And it was just like I get there. And that's, that's where I feel like so relatable to what you're saying. And it's so true. So many people are disassociated. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of instances like that.
let me bring up a couple of ideas that might be helpful for people. I've heard it said this way, which I think is interesting. The wiring that we adapted in our internal operating system to survive our childhood is not the same wiring that we need to be successful as adults, as leaders, as parents, as spouses, as fill in the blank, right? So
Yep.
if we want to be successful in life, we have to upgrade the wiring of our internal operating system. And to explore this wiring, I think it's helpful to think about a continuum. Look, our bodies can be more wired for self-protection, and they could be more wired for value creation.
Mm.
And the more what we've learned is that the more trauma one experiences in their life, the more they become wired for self-protection. All right, let me give you just a quick example. Like, we could ask the question, how do most people respond to failure? Well, they see it as something to avoid as opposed to something to approach. Well, why? Because avoiding failure protects them in the short term.
Mm-hmm.
Avoiding failure limits learning, growth, and development in the long term. So when our body is naturally inclined for most of us to avoid failure, and that feels safe and it feels comfortable, but it also holds us back from reaching our potential. And so that's one way, and that's, there's a variety of ways we can do this, but that's one way to explore, is our body wired more for self-protection or more for value creation? And it isn't, I believe, it isn't until we have clarity on where our body is wired along that continuum that we truly have self-awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm listening to you, and it's such an appropriate comment to make. It's the really rewiring. You are rewiring, you're talking about the body rewiring of your from protection to being, where I recognized how the brain is when you start to recognize the emotions, when you create more attachment, more secure connection with in your relationships, and how that creates a relaxation for yourself in terms of recognizing what's going on with you and being more self-aware and managing of your emotions. I remember reading about emotional intelligence 20 years ago, and I had this book, Primal Leadership, on my desk, and I would study it from cover to cover, but I didn't understand how to actually do it. They talked about these four domain, quadrants,
Quadrant.
quadrants, self-management, self-awareness, relationship management, social awareness. But I had no idea what is it that I'm supposed to be doing? Like listening. Yeah, I'm listening, but I'm really just sitting there and just listening to the same pattern, the same drama. And when I learned about emotions and attachment, really, it made a whole difference. And to your point, Ryan, I'm very, very impressed by your courage. It takes a lot of courage and dedication to go out and put yourself out there and say, I'm going to explore. Right? I'm going to explore. I'm going to put myself in a very unfamiliar territory and see what comes out. That takes a lot of courage. Takes a lot of drive to learn to be better. And I'm just really appreciating you for that. I'm very inspired. Additional, like, oh my gosh, there are people like me. It's good.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's very gracious of you. And I agree. Like, there's not very many people who are willing to step into the short term discomfort of dealing with their fill in the
Yeah,
blank.
yeah, it's very
Um,
difficult.
right? Because, and here's what we've learned, and this comes from the field of developmental psychology. Developmental psychologists have found that across all adults, 64% of adults never really develop in adulthood. They never really elevate along their being side. And why is that? Well, one of the reasons, to your point, Lola, is because at the base level of adult development, our bodies are wired to fulfill the needs of safety, comfort, and belonging. And guess what? Growth requires us to put ourselves in harm's way, to be uncomfortable, and to actually step outside of the group or the norms and not belong. And so to your point, like I think I can appreciate what you're saying is in order for people to grow and develop and become, it takes an act of courage. And quite frankly, most people lack that. And I just hope, and this is my belief, is that if we could help people better understand these principles and these concepts, I think we provide stepping stones for them to become courageous. That courage isn't just happen in an instant. It's an evolution, and we can help people make that evolution.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I know that I always tend to bring up my children and when we do the podcasts and the webinars, because I have 5 kids. I don't know if my mom mentioned that to you. And so 3 of them are teenagers and they're like my team, like I run my family kind of like I would a team with this using the same process. And it's so interesting. We have a YouTube channel actually and an entertainment channel on Instagram with a couple 100,000 followers. And a lot of the times I hear from people like they're just so amazed how my kids are so comfortable. They look so happy. They're so adventurous. They do so many exciting, fun things. And yeah, I really attribute that to their courage because we have stepped into very difficult, challenging, and uncomfortable conversations with this process of it's normalizing us to be able to feel this discomfort in situations, normalizing it being okay to have these kinds of conversations and to be able to share those vulnerable experiences, those emotions that are not typically shared in conversations. And so I think that it's so true. And as I learned this process and then started to integrate it with my children, the last 6 years, that is something that I have seen tremendously is their courage to be themselves, their courage to speak up, when they don't feel something is good in physically or in the situation. Their courage to step into something that takes risk. And I think that translates directly into a team. When we don't have a connected culture in an organization, then we lack that, courage in order to be truly ourselves in that experience. So I have one more question before we wrap this up. You mentioned the upgrade to the operating system, which I love that analogy. We usually say like we're rewiring the way that we communicate our feelings, fears, and needs. In the EMC process, we talk about rewiring the brain because we wire it, just like you mentioned, when we're younger. And the upgrade operating system, I think like immediately my Apple phone, right? I'm just like, oh, I need the upgrade. And then you see all the new upgrades that happen. You're like, yes, exciting. Or you see like the new photo updates and you're like, I don't like it so much. But with the rewiring, we have this perspective where we're taking all the wiring that occurred that's creating cycles that are not effective for us, and then able to create cycles that are very effective. So what would you say would be a tool? You did mention one tool about bringing that self-awareness. What would you say would be like an actionable tool, that someone listening could maybe implement, could take away, could put into effect, to maybe practice a little bit every single day? I'm a huge believer of daily habits, micro daily habits that we got to implement every single day to see like really the big picture. So what's something that they can do that they could take away from your book or something that you teach?
Yeah, in fact, this kind of is like, I would say, the third part of my new book. And let me summarize it this way: is I think that there's different levels or layers of efforts that we can engage in to upgrade our internal operating system. So I'm going to call them surface level efforts, deeper level efforts, and deepest level efforts. And I think the surface level efforts are a lot what you're describing. They're kind of daily habits that we can engage in to help us better regulate our body's nervous system. So these things are things like meditation, yoga, journaling. Even there's some new research coming out on the role that cold plunging can play in better regulating our body's nervous system. So I think those are some surface level strategies. In fact, I'll just call this out. One of the tools that I've used, and I've used the last 7 years, and I found incredibly helpful, is this book here. It's called The 5 Minute Journal.
Yeah.
So, Polina, you look like you recognize that book.
Yes.
So those are some surface level strategies. Deeper level strategies, to me, are what I do is I focus on mindsets. I help people understand that there's different sets of mindsets that are out there and that we can have, such as fixed versus growth mindsets, or closed versus open, prevention versus promotion. And if we can awaken to the quality of our mindsets, then we can engage in deeper level tactics to rewire, because what our mindsets are ultimately are neural connections in our brain. We can literally rewire these neural connections. So those are deeper level strategies, and we've talked about some of the deepest level already. So it's not the place to start, but I think if we've done some of the other efforts, we could get into these deeper level strategies that revolve around healing from trauma. So there's different therapy modalities, including EMDR. Also, there's research that are related to helping with different neurodeficiencies using neurofeedback therapy. And just something I've got my pulse on is the research that's coming out related to psychedelic assisted therapy, which is seeming to be a tactic that may be the most effective tactic for upgrading our internal operating system.
Okay, so you're going to love, I don't know how much you know about the EMC process, but you would absolutely love, we have this really amazing tool. I just reference it as the form, and I literally carry it everywhere I go. I mean, like I also happen to have this next to my desk. I have one in my car also. But this is what we find too, is like exactly what you're talking about. We actually separate emotions in those 3 different levels. We say surface emotions, which typically the actions that you talked about, yoga, meditation, journaling, breathing exercises or breath work, those respond to a lot of the surface emotions that come up. And then when we go down, we have the softer emotions, and then we have those primary emotions, which are related to the deeper and the deepest level. And so
Mhm.
we find that being able to go through a specific process allows us to feel safe enough to clearly identify and express what we're experiencing, conflicts or difficult situations. Then we are really able to like shine this flashlight to the
Yeah.
darkest parts of us, the deeper parts where people don't want to go. We are able
Yeah.
to really bring light and create space. And I think a lot of that is missing in understanding how to process those difficult experiences that we have. I'm a huge fan of, I mean, I taught yoga for 15 years, and I think it very much so attributed to my ability to raise 5 children, but also my ability to be calm amidst chaos, and to
Yep.
be also open for learning new things. And then the other thing I wanted to add was I do this like journaling process every morning, and it's called Expecting Miracles. And I just started it again online and in my social media, because I do notice when you put all of these tools together, that's when we can really create this thriving environment. Just like you said, our cells, our body has that root, it remembers trauma, it imprints
Mhm.
into our system, and then our cells remember the trauma. So when we can integrate all of these different tools and these different methods, then we can really see the fruition of our labor, our hard work, and
Yeah.
making this adjustment.
Yeah, and I also want to add emotionally focused therapy, where
Yeah, that
you
one's
go
good.
with a couple. I think as in the couple relationships, or where the relationship with your personal relationship, it's going to be very helpful, because I think once you create more security in your relationship, everything becomes a lot easier to manage in your own self and with others. So
Well,
it's great tools.
I also did that therapy on my own. I did a few EMDR sessions, but the emotionally focused therapy, even though it's specific for two people or partnership work or relationship work, I did
Yeah.
individual sessions for about 4 months straight. And that was really profound, because you're really working on the relationship with you and like your younger self.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's
Well,
true.
yeah, I love all of that. And maybe let me just kind of try to summarize, I think everything that you've just said, which is, and I hope this is like the primary takeaway from our overall conversation is
Yeah. I
where we
love it.
started is how we typically try to develop isn't bad, but it's not
Right.
the best way, right? And ultimately what we've talked about this entire time is if we want to truly become better, it is foundationally about healing our minds, our bodies, and our hearts. And
Yeah.
to the degree to which we heal our minds and bodies and our hearts is the degree to which we can be the person that we want to be the positive influence that we want to be in our world. I appreciate your example, Polina, as a parent, right? Because this isn't about this surely can be about work, but what's more important than your family? And I
Mm.
think that's what's interesting to me is when I help leaders vertically develop, and I've spent some time with them after a period of time, I'll ask them, what has been your biggest takeaway? And they always, they talk about the impact on their family relationships. And I love it. That to me, that's the biggest win that we can have. And I also think leaders, when they try this out, they feel it's safer for them to try it out with their family than in the workplace. So that's generally where they start. But again,
Mhm.
ultimately, this is about healing. So all these tactics that we talked about are foundationally about healing. So hopefully, this inspires, if you're listening to this, to take the next step in your healing journey so that you can be more of the person that you want to become.
Yes, and you have social media, which if those of you who are listening who would like to connect with Ryan, I'm not exactly sure what is that information, Ryan, your website, your social media links.
Yeah, website's probably the best place to go, ryangottfredson.com. In fact, on my website, I've got a couple of free self-assessments, a mindset assessment and a what's called a vertical development assessment. If you were to take those and if you're listening to this and you think, I want Ryan to unpack my results with me, I'd be happy to jump on a call with you. So that's a thank you for listening in to this podcast. But if you want to connect
Awesome.
on LinkedIn or any of the other social media
And
platforms,
we'll
I'd love to do
put
that as
the
well.
links in the description.
Yeah, and that's great that you have those assessments because we also have a team emotional safety assessment as well. So if you have a team and you want to know your personal assessment, you go to Ryan's website and do the assessments there, and you can head over to EMC Leaders and do your team safety assessment to see how you can be just the most incredible person ever and who you were meant to be. That's what we're here for. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to the Leader in You podcast. Thank you, Ryan, for joining us. It has been a pleasure, and we're so grateful for your time and your energy here. Thank you, Dr. Lola, as always, for hosting and being really I always say this, we are like the pioneer in this emotional intelligence field. We're doing something nobody else is doing. We're giving you the tools to integrate your emotional intelligence into your life so you can handle any situation that comes to you. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and we'll see you back here next week.
Thank you, Palina. Thank you, Ryan. So nice to be here with you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. It's a joy to share these podcasts with you. Be sure to check out our previous podcasts and subscribe to join us at our next podcast of The Leader in You, brought to you by EMC Leaders, taking care of the teams you care about. Until then, be well and be focused on your relationships. We'll see you soon.